Welcome to the digital learning on The Man in Asbestos by Stephen Butler Leacock. This is the video made for session 4. I'm content developer Prasanna Udpikar, Associate Professor in English. The Man in Asbestos is a short story prescribed for the general English students of 3rd semester BCom studying under Bengaluru City University, Bengaluru. This is the 4th video made for the 4th session on this short story. Learning objectives of this session are to sensitize the importance of work and joyfulness in life, to get the student acquainted with the style of the short story, to understand the story and grasp its meaning, to correlate the idea in the story with their life experiences, enjoy the charm and beauty of life with all its challenges and strife. The outcome of this session is sensitizing the students to the life of millennium, recapturing the era of the great conquest of nature, acquiring human values and world view, work and joyfulness in life. Now let's have a recap of what we have studied so far. The conversation between the narrator and the man in asbestos continues. The narrator was shocked to know that life had come to stand still. There was no work to be done. Machinery had killed work. Great conquest of nature was established. The final victory of man and machinery had taken place. Chemical food came into existence, leading to stagnation of agriculture. No death except fear of being broken existed. The narrator and the man in asbestos sat silently for a long time. The narrator looked about at the crumbling buildings, the monotone, unchanging sky, and the dreary, empty street. He realized these were all the fruits of the conquest of nature. These were the witnesses, the results of the elimination of work, the end of hunger and of cold, the cessation of the hard struggle, the downfall of change, and the termination of death. Now, it was not just the termination of death, it was the termination, the end of the happiness of millennium. The conversation between the narrator and the man in asbestos continues. The narrator asked, "Do you have war?" The man in asbestos said, "No, war has stopped centuries ago. We are done with the wars." They took to settling international disputes with the slot machine. After that, all foreign dealings were given up. Everybody thinks foreigners awful, as there is no communication, no dealings with any of the nations, so there is no war at all. The narrator asks about newspapers. Are there any newspapers now? Newspapers? The man in asbestos said. What on earth would we want them for? If we should need them at any time, there are thousands of old ones piled up. But what is in them anyway? Only things that happen, wars and accidents and work and death. When we don't have any wars, When we don't have any accidents, any work, nor any death, then why do we need newspaper? There wouldn't be anything in the newspaper. So the man in asbestos tells, we have completely done with all our burdens. All our burdens have disappeared. The next question of the narrator was about education. The man in asbestos said, during your time, first 15 years or so, you spent in getting education. But notice how we have improved on all that. Education is done by surgery. It is just a surgical operation. We have simply remodeled, curved, and convolute the inside of the brain by a long and painful mental operation. Everything learned was reproduced in a physical difference to the brain. The invention of surgical education is the simple system of opening the side of the skull and engrafting into it a piece of prepared brain. At first, of course, they had to use the brains of dead people, and that was ghastly. But very soon they found how to make molds that did just as well. After that, it was a mere nothing. An operation of a few minutes would suffice to let in poetry or foreign languages or history or anything else that one cared to have. For example, he pushed back the hair at the side of his head and showing a scar beneath it, he told the narrator, Look at this mark where I had my spherical trigonometry let in. That was, I admit, rather painful, but other things such as English, poetry or history can be inserted absolutely without the least suffering. When I think of your painful, barbarous methods of education through the year, I shudder at it. Oddly enough, we have found lately that for a great many things there is no need to use the head. We lodge them, things like philosophy and metaphysics, and so on, in what used to be the digestive apparatus. Now their discussion turned on love or marriages. The man in asbestos asked the narrator about how did they spend their time after education. The narrator said that one had to work after education, and then they fell in love and got married. The man in asbestos said that he never understood the arrangement of marriage, where they shared their belonging with a woman who did not earn. The narrator looks around and finds everyone alike. He asks the man in asbestos whether there were no women. The man said that there were women, but they too were like men, as they had revolted to get equality. The revolt which had begun during narrator's time. The narrator tells that women fought during his time for votes and equality. The man in asbestos continued with his comments on women. He said, women during your time covered with feathers and skins and dazzling colors, which were made of dead things. They laughed showing their foolish teeth. And they try to pull you into some contracts. The narrator was furious on listening to this. Immediately, he turned on the man in asbestos in wrath and said, "Asbestos, do you think that those jellybag equalities out on the street there, with their ash barrel suits, can be compared for one moment with our unredeemed, unreformed, heaven-created, hobble-skirted women of the 20th century?" The discussion between the narrator and the asbestos turns towards children. The narrator asks, "Are there no children here?" "Where are the children?" The man in asbestos says, "No, we don't have children. There is no birth and there is no death. Those children are horrible little hobgoblins with great big faces who cried constantly. They grew like funguses. I believe they were longer each year than they had been last." The narrator got up. He rose. "Asbestos," he said, "this then is your coming civilization, your millennium, this dull, dead thing, with the work and the burden gone out of life, and with them all the joy and sweetness of it. For the old struggle, mere stagnation, and in place of danger and death, the dull monotony of security and the horror of an unending decay. Give me back," he cried. He flung wide his arms to the dull air and said, "The old life of danger and stress, with its hard toil and its bitter chances and its heartbreaks, is more valuable. I know its worth now. Give me no rest," he cried aloud. And the narrator suddenly woke up from his sleep. He was back again in the room of his hotel, with the hum of the wicked, busy old world all about him, and loud in his ears the voice of the indignant man across the corridor. The summary of this session. The narrator observes crumbling building, monotone, unchanging sky, the dreary, empty street. He realizes that this was the fruit of the conquest of nature. Elimination of work, end of hunger, cold, hard struggle, the downfall of change and death, no newspaper, no love or marriages, education through surgery, no death, no birth and no death, no children. The narrator wakes up wishing for the old life of danger and stress, hard toil and bitter chances. Thank you, students. Thank you for listening to this video.